Adam, who do you think is truly responsible for insulting Islam and the Prophet?
Most Muslims won't like my answer, Omar, but it's not the silly cartoons the West occasionally produces. It's actually Muslims themselves.
What? Are you saying Muslims are responsible for insulting Islam and the Prophet?
Exactly, Omar. And I'll tell you how. Where do you think those people who draw insulting cartoons about the Prophet get their ideas? Who made them believe that the Prophet loved killing, married a child, or was driven by lust? Let's look at the hadiths that inspired these false images. First, Allah clearly commanded the Prophet not to force anyone into Islam. Allah said in chapter 10, verse 99, "And if your Lord had willed, everyone on earth would have believed, all of them entirely. Will you then compel people until they become believers?" Yet Al-Bukhari includes a hadith that completely contradicts this command. The hadith states, "I was commanded to fight the people until they say, 'There is no God but Allah.' If they say it, Allah will protect their blood and their property from me except by right, and their reckoning is with Allah." This single hadith alone paints the Prophet as a violent man who forced people into faith, something the Quran explicitly forbids. So either this hadith is fabricated or the Prophet disobeyed Allah, and we all know which one makes sense.
Yes, hadiths that clearly contradict the Quran, yet Muslims believe them as if they were absolute truth.
Exactly. Let me show you the hadith that actually gave those cartoon creators both the inspiration and the excuse to depict the Prophet as a pedophile and a lust-driven man. May Allah be exalted above what they claim. Hadith says the Prophet married a 6-year-old child. The Prophet married Aisha when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old. From the Quranic standpoint, child marriage is invalid because marriage requires both puberty and sound judgment, qualities only adults possess, not a 6-year-old. Allah said in chapter 4, verse 6, "And test the orphans until they reach marriageable age. Then if you perceive in them sound judgment, release their property to them." One hadith states that the Prophet married a girl after killing her father, her husband, and her uncle. The hadith states, Safiya bint Huyai was taken as a captive, and the Prophet chose her for himself. And this goes against what Allah said in chapter 4, verse 19. "O believers, it is not lawful for you to inherit women against their will." Another hadith states that the Prophet used to have intercourse with all of his 9 wives in one night. The hadith states, the Prophet used to go around to have intercourse with his wives in a single night, and he had the strength of 30 men. Another version of this hadith claims that the Prophet used to have intercourse with all his wives using one ghusl, ritual bath. The Prophet used to go around to all his wives with one ghusl. So we're supposed to believe that the Prophet went around telling his companions how many times he had intercourse in one night? Or were they spying on him? It's unbelievable how some people accept and even defend such disrespectful fabrications. I once debated someone about this hadith, and his excuse was that the Prophet only meant to teach us that one ghusl is enough after multiple intercourses. Seriously? Couldn't he have just said that directly? Was he required to describe his private life to make that point? In Arab and Muslim culture, it's considered shameful to speak openly about one's intimate relations. Yet they expect us to believe the Prophet did exactly that? If you believe the Prophet actually said such disgraceful things, then you have no right to be offended by the same lies portrayed about him in cartoons.
No wonder those cartoonists draw the Prophet as a pedophile. They're simply illustrating what's written in the hadith books that many Muslims follow blindly.
There's more, Omar, and it gets even worse. One narration claims that the Prophet saw a woman, felt desire, then went to his wife Zainab bint Jahsh to have intercourse. The Prophet saw a woman, so he went to his wife Zainab, who was tanning leather, and had intercourse with her. Then he came out to his companions and said, "A woman advances in the image of a devil and retires in the image of a devil. So if any of you sees a woman and is attracted to her, let him go to his wife, for that will repel what he feels in his heart." Another hadith claims the Prophet was intimate with his wives while fasting. The Prophet used to kiss and be intimate while he was fasting, and he was the one who had the most control over his desires. This directly contradicts the Quran, where Allah said in chapter 2, verse 187, "Permitted for you on the night of the fast, is sexual intimacy with your wives. The verse makes it clear that intimacy is only allowed at night, not during the day while fasting. And it doesn't stop there. Another hadith claims the Prophet was intimate with his wife during menstruation. When the Prophet wanted to be intimate with one of his wives while she was menstruating, he would tell her to put on a waistcloth. This again contradicts Allah's command in chapter 2, verse 222. And they ask you about menstruation. Say, it is a harm, so keep away from women during menstruation and do not approach them until they are clean.
Exactly, Adam. As you said, there are only two possibilities. Either you accept these disgraceful lies about the Prophet and believe he went against the Quran's teachings, or you reject them entirely and recognize them for what they are, lies and fabrications against him. So tell me, what other falsehoods do these so-called authentic hadith books spread about the Prophet?
Omar, there are many examples. Let me share just a few of the most shocking ones. One hadith portrays the Prophet as materially dependent. The Messenger of Allah died while his shield was mortgaged with a Jewish man for 30 seah of barley. This paints the Prophet, the leader of the believers, as someone unable to provide for himself, which clearly contradicts the Quran's portrayal of him as self-sufficient and dignified. Another hadith denies a concession to a blind man. A blind man, Ibn Maktum, said, "O Messenger of Allah, I am blind, I have no guide, and my house is far. May I pray at home?" The Prophet said, "I do not find any concession for you." But Allah said clearly in the Quran, Allah does not burden any soul beyond its capacity. This hadith directly contradicts Allah's mercy and fairness. Then there's a mu'allaq narration, meaning it has a broken chain of transmission, that absurdly claims the Prophet attempted suicide. Revelation paused for a time, and the Messenger of Allah became so saddened that he repeatedly went to mountaintops to throw himself down. Each time Gabriel would appear and say, "O Muhammad, you are truly the Messenger of Allah," and his heart would be calmed. How can anyone believe this when Allah said, "O you who believe, do not kill yourselves. Indeed, Allah is ever merciful to you." And finally, the infamous report that claims the Prophet was affected by magic, as if he lost his senses. Magic was worked on the Messenger of Allah so that he imagined he had done something when he had not. This claim aligns perfectly with what the disbelievers accused him of in the Quran. And the wrongdoers say, "You follow none but a man bewitched." These fabrications are not harmless. They insult the Prophet, contradict Allah's words, and make a mockery of Islam itself.
I honestly can't believe that the Prophet described in the Quran is the same Prophet portrayed in the Hadith. If these blind Hadith followers used even a fraction of their intellect, they would reject these fabrications and defend their Prophet instead of dishonoring him. Is this the Prophet whom Allah described in the Quran as having exalted character? And indeed, you are of a great moral character.
No, Omar, it's not the same Prophet. The Prophet in the Hadith is not the one of great moral character that Allah described. Just look at this fabricated narration that portrays him as someone who curses and insults people. The Hadith states, he said, "O Allah, any person whom I have cursed or insulted, make it a source of mercy for him on the day of judgment." But the Quran gives us a completely different image of the Prophet, one who faced mockery with patience, not curses. Indeed, we are sufficient for you against the mockers, those who set up with Allah another deity. Soon they will know. And we certainly know that your chest feels constricted by what they say. So glorify your Lord with praise and be among those who prostrate and worship your Lord until certainty, death, comes to you. That's the Prophet the Quran describes, patient, merciful, and noble in character. I rest my case.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
We're not here to issue fatwas or change anyone's beliefs. These videos simply reflect our understanding and perspective. Our goal is to inspire you to think, reflect, and read the Quran yourself, just as Allah commanded, and discover the real Islam for yourself.